Okay, welcome everyone. I'm about to get started here. Give a quick intro to our guest here. Let me make sure I can find him over. Where is he? Let's do that. 1 second, I'll be right back. I don't know if you guys can hear my 3-year-old trying to go down for a nap. Sorry about that.
Good luck.
There you are, Eric. All right.
Tell him to mute.
Tell him to mute. Yeah, can mute his session.
Wow, EJ.
Yeah.
Who's talking to me?
David Anderson.
Hey,
Anderson.
David.
Hey, brother.
I hear you. I don't see you. I understand we are actually going to Orlando.
We are actually going to Orlando, baby.
You were the decision maker on that. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. That's really great.
You and me, baby.
Well,
the two of you.
Yeah. Take notes on this presentation. Let me know what needs to be cut, basically.
You got it. Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna give an intro to Eric, and we'll get launched. Everybody, feel free to mute yourselves for the time being, and let's mute a couple folks. All right, great. And Eric, just to confirm, in terms of presenting, do you want people to hold questions until a question and answer period?
Oh, no, listen. I'm glad you brought that up. I do have some material I'd like to go through, a fair amount. But I've noticed there's a difference in the way Zoom meetings are run as opposed to in person. In person, it's freer for people to ask questions. If there's something that is unclear about what I just said, or that would help other people understand something that we're talking about, please ask that right away. Let's not make sure there's any confusion about whatever I'm talking about at that moment. And then we can pause every 10 minutes or so and take bigger questions or more complicated ones. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Sounds good. Well, I'll give a quick intro and then we'll get rolling. So here we have Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson RPT has been a piano tech for over 40 years, spending most of his career working with manufacturers. His jobs have included Kimball National Service Manager, Bosendorfer Primary Concert Technician, and U.S. Distributor, and as Director of Artist Services for Yamaha. Eric has prepared concert pianos in most of the major concert halls in the U.S. and has worked with a wide range of artists as both technician and artist relations manager. He is now a technician in private practice in Metro New York City and Charleston, South Carolina. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Eric.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Ethan, for the invitation. It's an honor to be asked, and thanks to everybody for showing up. And hopefully my goal is that this is a worthwhile hour and a half anyway to you. So the title of the class is How to Think About Voicing, or in some cases it might be How Not to Think about Voicing, because we've had some really, really fascinating presentations already during this masterclass. Yeah, Nick Gravanier had a fascinating presentation on the impact of the shape of the hammer when it strikes the string on piano tone, and also, there was something very important that I want to stress, and that is we have to be aware of and familiar with the overtone series, both when we're tuning and also when we're voicing. We should be able to listen. So there were some really great things in some earlier classes, but also, a big hats off to Steingraber for their presentation. So, you were hearing these things about matching hammer mass to the belly assembly, and very, very specific things that Steingraber does. But the the difference is we don't always have, when we're the grunts in the field, so to speak, we don't have ideal circumstances. And so it's really easy to think that voicing is a real science. And if I just have this magic, needle of the proper, exactly down to the nano millimeter, the proper length, and made out of hand pounded steel from one of the islands of Japan, if I have this magic tool, I'll be able to summon forth from any piano I come across beautiful, rich singing, blah blah blah, bloom, all these sorts of very desirable things. And the reality is, the real world is a lot different. And so I'm presenting more of a hands-on, more of a tactical, okay, what do we do in the field? And I'm trying to put a framework on the idea of voicing. And I also, a lot of my approach to this is based on my background. And so, for no fault of my own, I had a rather unique background working primarily with concert pianos and primarily with European concert pianos. So my whole approach to this stuff is based on that experience, and it's going to be different from anybody else. But what I'm hoping to present is a bit of a roadmap. So we're going to be thinking about voicing, but then we're actually going to be doing voicing, or at least stepping through the procedures in ways that are, if you practice them a little bit, should be very efficient and be able to deliver, as David Anderson says, a radical improvement, not just a little, yeah, I guess it sounds a little better, this kind of stuff, to like, wow, I got my piano back, which is a very common expression here. And when you hear it too, you'll feel just as rewarded for all your hard work. So the roadmap I'm presenting is a physical one, actual steps to take, but it's also very much a way you think about it, because to take this approach may require a difference in the way you approach the way you think about your own work, and you think about your approach to work. So the other thing I wanted to mention, after watching Alex Gerson's session yesterday on Steingraber, I was in his not his position, but representing a manufacturer, and a very specific manufacturer. And one of the things you are very much aware of is that manufacturer, Steingraber in particular. I mean, what a fabulous piano. If you've never had a chance to see a Steingraber up close, you're in for a real wonderful experience. And I swear to God, that model 212, that Steingraber 212 is a gift to Western civilization. It's just a spectacular piano that I just can't say enough good things about. Better than? No. These are all wonderful instruments. The Bösendorfer 225 is a completely different thing, but that 212. But here's the thing, its beauty is very fragile. And its beauty is at its peak in many cases as it leaves the factory. Alex and his crew spend hours and hours down, nitpicking down to the final nubs, both touch and tone. So when it leaves there, maybe not when it gets to somewhere, but when it leaves there, it's really at optimal Steingraber condition. And the mistake that people make is they think voicing, I'm gonna create something in this voicing. And really what you're trying to do is remove blocks for the sound of the piano to come out. And the sound that's going to come out from a Steingraber is going to be naturally different. If you follow these steps and these procedures, you're going to get the natural sound as much as is left of the particular piano you're working on. So this really works and is very important when you're facing one of the top tier European instruments, or one of the high-end Japanese instruments. When you're a very high-end piano, this is really important, because the subtlety of the differences in tone are again very fragile, and you can really muck that up very easily if you're not careful. And a big part of what Alex faces and what I face too is people complaining about, or I faced, people complaining about a particular instrument and various people prescribing all kinds of remedies, you know, new hammers, new this, new that, when really all it really needed was a good regulation and a good hammer maintenance. And by good, I mean better than average, aware of very specific certain key details that are going to make sure that the particular voice of this piano comes out, but reasonable and not mystical. So that's sort of where we're going with that. Do you want to bring up the first slide? Are there any questions so far? I can't imagine.
Let me see here. Nope, no questions yet. I'll bring up the first slide.
I'm still rambling, so we won't start getting questions until I'm done rambling. So listen, so I want this to be a little fun and flexible. I'm not looking at, did you bring up that first slide? Let me look here.
Not yet. Give me 1 second. Yeah.
All right. So this is the class in a nutshell. And I'm going to be stepping through these things, but this is, and part of it is you'd like to break things into nice clean boxes, but they don't always fit into boxes. And voicing in particular is one of those things. And here's lesson number 1, and that is what you're really trying to do is voicing brings out the inherent voice in a piano. Voicing doesn't ideally put something into an instrument. Now, there are always exceptions to every rule, and you know, you're faced with all kinds of things, but basically this is what my approach to voicing is, and that is you're eliminating all the things that block the good tone of a piano. Now, these things are normal regulation and piano maintenance procedures. Nothing here is mystical, nothing here is unusual, but the thing that might be a little bit different is looking at these as steps that can be taken within a reasonable service call. So it's one thing if your client is going to be paying you to come and spend 2 days and really do everything beautifully. It's another thing to, okay, how can I bring real radical improvement to this particular piano that I'm working on within a reasonable period of time. I do this kind of stuff within 2 hours, including the tuning fairly regularly, but it also always depends on what kind of shape the piano is in. And so as we go through these things, you will have decisions to make as you sit in front of that particular piano. You will have decisions to make, but hopefully this kind of a roadmap will give you some guidance. Next slide. Oh, can I do it? No. Well. There we go. So just that was actually in the New Yorker. So take pride in the ubiquitous familiarity everybody has with our profession. Go to the next slide. I worked for Kimball and Bösendorfer for about 8 years. And I was, in fact, national service manager for Kimball. So if you want to know a thankless job, I'm really glad I got that out of my way early in my career, because that would have been quite something else to end up with that as a peak of my career, talking to people about the problems they were having with their Kimballs. I did, but that was the thing that made that worthwhile. Is I also spent most of that time going around the country preparing pianos for Bösendorfer. I did spend a year at Jordan Kitts Music, and I helped. I tried to get my forklift driver's license, but that was they were happy. Goodbye, Eric. We wish you success somewhere else. The next slide. And just so you know exactly how old I am, that was not my first NAMM show. Next. And my stringing techniques in particular have gotten better. Well, you know, the tools have gotten better. There's been a big improvement in the development of some of these tools. So it's easier nowadays. Not the way it was back in the olden days. Next slide. This is, I've worked with many famous artists, and some of them have, a couple of them, one of them in particular has grown to be a really dear friend. And this is Garrick Olson and I when we first met. Now this would be about 1980 or so. Wow. And the piano world was a very different place, and there was active competition on the concert piano scene. Bösendorfer Baldwin was very active. Yamaha was just beginning to come on the scene. But you know, I mentioned this before, the Van Cliburn competition, the semi-finalists of the Van Cliburn would always be mentioned in a story on the front page of the New York Times. You know, it was below the fold, but it was still on the front page. You know, people don't they don't do this anymore. And it's a much different world in the concert piano world. But one of the big advantages, one of the big advantages that I've heard some great music. Show the next slide. And this is a little bit more age appropriate. About 2 years ago, I guess. Next slide. So, you know, I'm not trying to name drop, but one of the things that I've heard some really unbelievable piano playing, and Sergio Fiorentino was one of these guys who just didn't have, he had the name within the, you know, the very inner circle, but he was unknown to the general public. And when I was with Yamaha, we did a series of recitals, and I presented him twice, because the first time, this is in Alice Tully Hall in New York, and the hall was half full, and we're going, wait a minute, this isn't right. So we presented him again the second year, and the word had gotten out, and so we had a sold out hall the second year. But a big part of my approach to this, and which I think will come out when we start talking about some of the specific technical steps, is you know, I've seen what pianists can do. I've seen what a brilliant pianist performing on a wonderful piano, you know, playing some of the great music of civilization. You know, I've had a whole series of those intellectual and emotional experiences that are hard to describe, but have played a very important role in my professional life and how I approach piano service and voicing and regulation and just thinking about the whole thing. So this is very much, you know, I'm not an old piano guy. I don't like anything older than 50 years, frankly. And I'm definitely not an old soundboard kind of person. They tend to be even more that way in Europe, but newer is better to me. And concert pianos have, you know, at the very highest level, they have a shelf life, frankly. I don't think you can really expect a soundboard to take on that kind of shape under that kind of pressure for very long, 10 years, probably at the most. It'll be a perfectly playable piano after 10 years, but it won't be performing at the peak of its capability. So these are some of the experiences that have developed this particular roadmap. Go ahead. And some people say that's really the extent of my career. That really represents my career. And to be honest, I'm not sure I can argue. So, but it's been fun, right? Next slide. And, you know, if you can't have fun, why do it? Don't answer that question. All right, so the next slide. I've spent a lot of time with focusing on European pianos, and listen, it's so awesome to have Steingraber playing an active role here. I've toured most of the European factories, and Udo Steingraber had a very clear and succinct description of the role of rims. And there are essentially two types of rims, right? There's laminated rims of various materials, and then there's solid wood rims. And the biggest examples are Bösendorfer uses solid spruce, both inner and outer rims. They're cut in blocks for the inner rim, and the outer rim is curved, edge glued planks of spruce, but it's all solid wood, as opposed to laminated rims, which basically is most other manufacturers, certainly Steinway, but Yamaha and Kawai, and it's when you make it out of certain materials in a particular way, like Steinway does, it has a very specific resonance to it, but it's also a relatively inexpensive way of making rims. Just glue them together and put them in a press, and it's not terribly expensive. It's certainly nowhere near the cost of a solid spruce rim. So Udo described it as, and this is where your wheel should be turning a little bit in terms of voicing. He said there are basically two types of rim, two types of sound, two types of general piano sound. There's the swimming pool and the beach. And the swimming pool has hard vertical edges, and the water splashes against the edge and breaks into little droplets, blah, blah, blah. The beach is a much more smooth surface, and the waves don't crash as much as they lap up and down. And his description was that the laminated rim was the swimming pool, and the solid rim was the beach. And I think that sort of makes sense, right? And if you look at Steingraber is a bit of an exception, but if you look at most pianos that have laminated rims, they also have duplex scaling, and sometimes quite aggressive duplex scaling. And you need to be conscious of the choice that the piano maker has made in terms of the duplex. And you have a couple different types of duplex, right? You have what I call an untuned duplex, like on Steinway. So it has this plate that has ridges, old pyramids in it, but the pyramids aren't really accurately defined at the very tip. They're kind of rounded and not precision made, let's say, on purpose. And so the result is you get kind of this wash of higher harmonics, not specific resonances. Then you have somebody like Estonia, if I'm remembering correctly, who has what I call a tuned duplex. So they're wedges, and they're much more precisely formed at the top, but they don't necessarily move. So I say tuned as opposed to untuned. And then you have somebody like Fazioli who has tuned elbow. So they have wedges that are very sharply defined, but then their whole purpose is that they intentionally move these up and down to get very specific harmonics from the duplex. So and then you have makers like Bösendorfer up until the VC series, who didn't have duplex. One of the biggest additions in the VC series is the use of duplex on a Bösendorfer. And that would be a contrast, right? Bösendorfer with a beach rim, you would expect to not have high harmonics and not have a duplex. And Steingraber is the other sort of oddity. They don't use duplex, but they do have a laminated rim. So the second lesson in all of this, the first one, where are my notes here? Well, whatever the first one was, the second one is respect the manufacturer. And the first one was you're removing blocks. So you're removing blocks that stand in the way of the particular piano tone that this manufacturer chose. They specifically chose components and construction materials and steps to come up with a particular sound. And there's a very particular Steingraber sound and Bösendorfer sound and Zauder sound and Grotrian sound. These are not random events. And so you have to be conscious of that. So it's very easy in terms of voicing to think, well, I have to do something. I have to create something by voicing. And you really don't. That's been done. What you have to do is maintain it. That's your purpose. I'm sorry. Now I'm rambling. Ethan, are there questions?
We haven't got any questions yet. I don't think they're going pretty well.
All right.
And people
All
can
right.
feel free to unmute and speak up if they do have something.
Yeah. Okay, so when you start digging into this, now this is the Blüthner factory, and Blüthner does a combination of the two. They have a solid inner rim, but their outer rim is made of blocks of laminated hornbeam, and so they use laminated sections, but nothing's under tension. So this is the thing. You have a tension-filled framework like Steinway, or you have zero or close to zero tension in your rim, like Bösendorfer, and in this particular case, like even though they have a laminated rim, it has no tension to it. Next slide. And people ask about the extra string on Blüthners. In terms of all new Blüthners for at least the past 20 years, I don't know. I'm not really a researcher, but they're in the top two treble breaks, and they're all tuned as unisons. There's no monkey business tuning into a fourth or an octave or that kind of stuff. Older Blüthners with different bridges, with the separate bridges, that's another story. But any new Blüthner that looks basically like this, just with extra bridge pins, they tune to the unison. And I just think that cute little damper is. I think it's cute. And don't make, if you run across these, here's why I'm encouraging you to raise your thinking a little bit in terms of the sophistication of your approach, or the subtlety of your approach, and begin thinking about, some of the differences with European pianos, is so you can get this work. These pianos need maintenance, but the person who makes them sound like they did when they were new, as opposed to somebody, who feels they need to create a better sound, chances are the first person is going to get the work. So that's why I'm encouraging you to think this way. And in terms of Blüthner, you might run across a Blüthner where, if you haven't already, where you're asked to tune these fourth strings, and they're not that difficult. You don't need to even pluck. Actually, if you're in a relatively quiet environment, you can, as you're muting, you'll be able to hear that fourth string if you compare it to one other string. It's faint, but it's there, and so it's not. Don't get freaked out about the complexity of tuning that fourth string. Next slide. And then that shows you, if you look way up under the crossbeam where the strings are going, there's a brass plate there, and it has a little notch cut out of it, and that's how they get that string to suspend above the strike point, but close enough so that it's very much activated by sympathetic vibrations from the other strings. Next slide. This is at the August Förster factory, and you'd never know that August Förster had this sort of floating soundboard in their bays, unless you happen to be walking by before they put the outer rim on it and go, "Oh, that's interesting. I never knew that." So there's some great pianos out there. This is one of the things. You never used to hear of Steingraber. You never used to hear of Zauder. You never used to hear, or you heard little rumors here in this country, but you'd have to go to Europe. And just like the NAMM show, there was an annual trade fair for European dealers and manufacturers. And these makers would show there. And it was, it's almost clandestine. Now I have 2 Steingraber dealers within a bit of a drive, but a driving distance Zouder is still a little tough. I mean, they have sales rep, but you won't see many pianos. But Bludner, there's quite a few Bludner dealers. Bludner has had a good representation in the U.S. for a long time.
Hey, Eric, DA, how is, what's the mechanical, what's the technical, how is this soundboard held down? This is just a free section of the soundboard that's held in along its edge?
This is you see that shape, right? The dark vertical horizontal cut, and then where it's sort of set back. Imagine that they cut that out of a rim and just moved it back 10 millimeters with the soundboard and everything. So the soundboard is glued flush onto that piece.
Rim,
and it's attached on each end, but it's floating right where that cut is.
Got it.
Cool.
I had a question here. Let's see. What do we got? From Nick Latursky. What purpose does a Mason Hamlin tension resonator serve, and why do you think no other manufacturers implemented it?
I can't comment on that. I haven't worked for Mason. I mean, my understanding is that it holds the tension. Mason being, I'm assuming that would be a dead giveaway to me that Mason is a high tension rim company like Steinway. And, I mean, that makes sense. It's an American company, so they were all producing kind of the same sound at one point. My guess is that at one point that wasn't such an easy thing to do, to keep the rims in shape. And they came up with that as a solution, and it worked, and it became a symbol of the brand. Beyond that, I don't know. Listen, the thing about, why hasn't another manufacturer, these are very competitive companies, you know what I mean? And it was tough enough for people to accept overstrung bass, because it was first appeared in Steinway, as if I understand correctly. But, they're not going to necessarily have any interest, much less steal some other company's specific kind of technology for marketing purposes, so they may think it's a great idea. My experience at Yamaha, at Brisendorfer, they didn't have that tension, but they may think it's a great idea, but we can't ever use that. Mason's out of it.
I have another comment too, as long as you're speaking in this macro piano way that you're so wise in. How do you feel about the relatively, for the glacial piano business, rapid acceptance of WNG parts and generally composite parts by the high end of the piano world?
Well, help me. It seems like it's a little bit of a mixed bag, right? I mean, Steingraber has gone full speed ahead. I don't know that, I haven't seen that Brisendorfer has. Feurig did, a number of the smaller ones did, again, I'm speculating a little bit, but I think it's a combination of the two things. I think there's a distinct advantage in the stability of these parts, but I also think that, our ability to process wood has gotten better. So the stability that, this kind of stuff first addressed, some of it is inherent in wood, like the flexing of a hammer shank and this kind of thing. But dimensional stability in whippings and this kind of stuff, I think that's not as big a problem now as it had been. Yeah. So I think it's a lot of this stuff is marketing. Do we want to be seen as a tradition, or do we want to be seen as a forward thinker? And Steingraber is going into the forward thinking realm with both feet, man. I love it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. I don't hesitate saying if I don't know something. Next one. There we go. So this is August Firster. And again, you know, I wouldn't know this unless I looked at a cross section. And they also, August Firster uses this combination. So you'll see the stripy yellow and less yellow band in the middle with, you know, that's the laminated inner rim. And then you have the outer rim, which is kerfed. I forget what they weren't using spruce. They were using, I'm forgetting what it was, forming the outer rim. And then,
but it's a curved solid piece.
Correct.
Wow.
And then a thinner, an additional band of laminations that the finish coat goes on. But that's a fairly thick band at that treble. So, you know, it's interesting here. They're doing both tension and sort of non-tension. And look, you know, August Firster, if you've spent any time, that's a really nice piano too. And you just can't, you know, here's the thing, you cannot, one cannot get into this, well, which one's better, you know? It's like, what's a better flower? These are very specific approaches to tone that have been built up by these companies over a long period of time. And to be a good piano technician, you have to be aware of it and you have to respect it. And you have to, your primary goal should be, how do we get that inherent sound back out of this piano? It should not be, how do we make this sing and bloom and, you know, sound like this Hamburg C that I saw in Lithuania, and it was all from 1902, and it was all original, and it had the best sound, and that's what I want everything to sound like. And it's like, dude. So next slide. So this, if you haven't had the pleasure of seeing a Fazioli, you will see these hieroglyphics. So, you know, don't tell me Fazioli doesn't take voicing seriously. And you had better take it just as seriously. It doesn't mean you have to know what all these lines mean. I don't. But it should be a symbol of, well, maybe just, you know, maybe the lacquer bottle isn't the first tool I should reach for on this piano. Maybe I should think a little bit more. Next slide. How are we doing on time? You know, the CF6 has an open window play to it, and you know, people's reaction, oh, they're copying Bösendorfer, you know, they bought Bösendorfer and now they're doing everything like that. And it's like, no, folks, Yamaha is a very, very serious piano builder. I spent 12 years working with them. They really know their crap. It's not like, oh, we had to have Bösendorfer show us how to make an open window plate. No, they knew perfectly well how to do that. And their concert pianos are really, you know, including these smaller sizes, they're wonderful, wonderful instruments, as are the Kawais. And you will hear, especially at the concert level, this is one of the advantages I've had, unfortunately, that I can't feel guilty about it, but the chances are not many more people are going to have this experience of going to many, many, many piano competitions, high level, Clyburn, you know, all these, I've been to dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And you can hear the difference, for example, between Kawai and Yamaha. You can hear the two different approaches. And when you get a chance to hear them in that kind of setting. And this was a couple of years ago now. I'm not trying to put words in anybody. Don Menino's here or somebody. I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth. But, you know, 15 years ago, Kawai was very much going directly after Steinway, in my opinion. They were going toe to toe with a very, very forceful, firm, loud sound. And Yamaha was going in a more colorful direction, but they did not have the power. I mean, it was a CF3S at that point. They were glorious pianos, but they didn't necessarily overpower anybody. And so it wasn't an accident. You know, these are choices that companies make. I saw lots and lots of prototypes. This was during the development of the CF3S. So the move from the CF3S to the CFS. No, even I don't remember. But there were lots of experiments. So Yamaha's on its own track. Who knows what they're picking up from Brussenhofer, but they're on their own track. They're not suddenly changing direction because they own a Austrian piano maker. Next slide.
There's a question from Bryant. What is the advantage of an open window plate?
Well, the biggest advantage is that the coil is closer to the top surface of the pin block. And so you have much less, whatever amount, some amount less bending of the pin. And it allows a really fine tuning, a very, very fine control of the tuning pin with the tuning hammer. The other reason is alignment. You can see those strings are supposed to be in a pretty darn straight line. And speaking of my experience at Kimball, not all piano manufacturers are able to put their pins in a straight line where the strings aren't wrapping around the other pins. Don't ask me how I know about that. And so, what you do is you cast the plate and then you drill it, and you're hopefully drilling in the right place. But this kind of removes one level of potential for inaccuracy, getting the plate just out of the way. And so you're specking everything, spotting everything directly on the pin block. But the feel and the stability of the pins is the primary advantage. Next slide. And just, when you first see a Blüthner with all those extra strings, it gets a little imposing. That's a lot of tuning pins, dude. But you just step through the stuff methodically and it all works out. Next slide. And if you haven't seen the Fazioli trap work, that to me, when I first saw it, I said, it looks like a piece of landing gear. And that's for the sostenuto pedal. That's for arguably the least used pedal on the whole piano. And that's the kind of design that goes into it. Next slide, please. And back to Steingraber, you're going to see this little beautiful notch out of the bridge at a very particular point. And, don't try to ask Alex, why do you do that? Because the answer is going to be, it sounds better, and the other thing about, Steingraber has these solid spruce tops that they recommend, and it makes perfect sense. But let me tell you, one of the big differences is, boy, is that solid spruce top light. You can really tell when there's a Steingraber with a laminated top. Anyway, it's just, it's these beautiful little important details that makes up this particular world of piano building. Next.
Do you have anything to say about plastic laminate in the outer rim?
No.
Okay. Had a question about that.
I've never seen it or dealt with it, so.
Thanks.
And I don't know. I'm really happy they were here. It's a great company. But even here, look, they're not individually tying their strings. You think they don't know how to do that? Do you think Steingraber said, well, it'll be cheaper if we use a single hitch pin? No, they have a reason for doing it that way. I don't know what it is, but you better believe that's not a random choice when you're talking about this particular level. Next slide. And, again, on a Steingraber, like, if you start looking for these little telling details, you begin to find all kinds of cool stuff. Don't ask me why, because it sounds better. The next slide. And also in a Steingraber, you know, this is a very shaped hammer. And, you know,
Super shaped.
if you want that Steingraber sound, then you had better try at least to match as close as you reasonably can that shape. If you know, put a more rounded sound, you know, you can't say you're doing bad work, except it's not going to sound like the rest of them, or they're not going to have the same sound. So, you know, you have to, all these are clues that the piano maker has made some really, really serious decisions. And your goal is to support those decisions. Next slide. Then a glamour shot, and next slide.
Wow.
So this is unrelated to Steingraber, but sometimes when you're a piano technician, it's as important what you don't do as what you do. I said do. And I am not a big fan of Teflon powder. And when people say why, this is why. It gets all over every place. And just because you can buy it in 5-pound bags at Amazon doesn't mean you should use it that way. Teflon has a very limited but specific place, and just being dumped willy-nilly is not the way to do it. If you've ever seen a European technician or a factory technician work, it's not going to look like this when they're done. Fred Sturm had a class the other day on where he was talking about key bushings, and he was talking about heated brass cauls to size the key bushings. And you know, if you're going to up your game to match this kind of level, or the European concert kind of level of high-end level of piano work, then you should think about this, because there is, yes, we can all do it by hand, but you cannot deny that it is inconsistent. It is simply inconsistent. And the videos you showed made it look like you're not really compressing the felt anyway. You're compressing the wood, which is very responsive to humidity. So these brass cauls are a really good, serious way of getting really accurate dimensions. And a lot of what we talk about in piano technology is a small but definite movement. If you get a small but definite movement side to side on a key, you know, you're in a pretty good spot. He uses Teflon in the bushing before he applies the heat, and I like that idea because you're not melting the Teflon, but you're setting the Teflon into the fibers, rather than just spreading it around like fairy dust and hoping that it ends up between two things that are supposed to be rubbing against each other, rather than two things that are not supposed to be rubbing against each other, like my pants and the key frame. So, and you know, the one thing everybody knows to do, well, we got to lube the key bed, right? Get out the Teflon powder and lube the key bed. That is not the first thing you need to do. First of all, the shift pedal is hardly ever used. Secondly, if you just keep it clean, the key bed clean, and you wipe it out, you're going to be solving most of your problems. So I have a little bit of a hang up with Teflon powder. Next slide, please. You know, don't be this guy, right? The piano moved, and there's $2 worth of Teflon powder down at the shift block. Don't be that guy. Next slide. And we are going to be talking about voicing, and hopefully you understand we have been talking about voicing, but the other really important rule is that you have to work with what you have. And so there's no way you're going to get good piano tone out of this hammer, right? There's just no way. You have to work with what you have. You have to set reasonable expectations for the kind of tone you're going to get. So next slide. I think I've got a couple of these. You know, people think of voicing as a separate thing, as you know, well, I don't really have time to regulate, but I do have time to do some voicing. It's like that putting a needle in the hammer is the last thing you should do. And ideally, somebody's phone is ringing. Ideally, taking care of all these other steps is going to dramatically lessen your, I don't know if you can hear that. Spring's coming here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But look at this hammer. You're never going to get good tone out of that, right? Unless you do something radical, like really reshape it. But no amount of magic needling is going to get good tone out of that. The next slide, please. This is somebody who had the right idea, right? Right? No, kind of. Well, maybe, but let's just say they went a little too far. There's no way you're going to get good tone out of this piano, out of this hammer. Realize, a big part of what you need to do to move into this particular world is work on your own aural acuity. And there is a tone produced by tension, right? You know how a hammer is made with great tension across the crown. There is a tone produced by tension. But with this particular hammer, that tension is gone because it's been needled so much right at the strike point. You can harden it, but that's going to give you a different tone. That makes it brighter. That doesn't change. That doesn't bring it back to the tone that's produced by felt under,
Jesus.
tension.
They also destroyed the string cuts, completely destroyed the string cuts.
Yeah. Oh, listen, David, I've got some good string cuts, one coming up. David and I are kindred spirits on this. Next slide. It
almost looks like it was like a moth or something.
Yeah,
yes,
man.
yeah,
Creepy.
Hungry moth.
Really creepy.
It's a poor picture, but it's an adjustable key slip. All right. Thank you, Fazioli. I loosened 2 screws. It's a pin that is that nose. All right. And we're looking at the underside of a key slip. And so you can adjust the spacing of the key slip. How cool is that, right? Next slide. You can also adjust the pressure of the back rail. So, these guys are pretty serious. Next slide. So this brings me to one of my first very technical points, and we're going to, let's see, is the other camera still working? Ethan?
Yeah. Did you want to show some things on the other camera?
Yeah.
Okay, let's stop the share. Let me find it. All right. There it is. And I've got it sharing the spotlight there.
Great. Okay, so we've been talking in general, and we've been sort of setting the philosophical grounds, sort of the spiritual, even if you think of it this way, that these are, this is one of the things that connected me with David when I first heard him speak, and that is, pianos to me, high-end pianos, where I spent most of my career, high-end pianos, these are really magical constructions. All right, they're important components in history and in civilization, what we know of as Western civilization. And so I have a great deal of respect for them, and that's what I'm trying to convey to you, especially when you get an opportunity. Look, not all pianos are these level in quality, but when you run across them, and you increasingly will, you need to approach it in the proper way. So,
quick question there, Eric.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Your other camera, I see something moving. I just want to make sure you're not like pulling a microphone out or something.
No.
Everything okay over there?
No.
Okay.
No, it's fine. We're fine.
I'm gonna turn off the other camera and just let me know when you want to turn it back on.
No,
Okay.
I'm going there. I'm going there right now.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
So the first thing is this category of tonal killers. All right. These are things that will destroy piano tone without even beyond what you're able to deal with in the hammer. And one of the most important ones, and I see this all the time, and I'm like a broken record on this, is the damper upstop rail. If the damper upstop rail is set incorrectly, you've got real problems. If it's set too low, you are choking the travel of the key off at its last, one might say, most critical point. And if it's set too high, the touch is really affected, and it's often hard for a pianist to say what the exact problem is, but they'll say it feels clunky, it feels this, it feels that, and it's the miscorrected, set damper upstop rail. So this piece right here, right, the damper upstop rail, we have the damper underlever, this piece right here, and the underlever, shoot, the sostenuto's in the way, but the underlever will connect with the upstop rail. And there should be, this is another one of these small but definite motion issues. The way to check it is with the key depressed, you should be able to just, I only have two hands, so you should feel just a slight but definite motion. So the key is depressed and held, and you raise up on the damper, and you should feel just a small little bit of definite motion. You don't want it to be compressing the felt. You want it to be a very small but definite gap. This will make sure that the damper upstop rail is not interfering with the keystroke. And let me tell you something, if you haven't experienced hearing a piano explode to life when you've just corrected the damper upstop rail from being set too low, you're in for a real treat, because that difference will stick with you. And there's no amount of lacquering, there's no amount of anything that you're going to do that's going to return the type of sound that's being eliminated through a misset damper upstop rail. So it's really critically, the first thing I do on any piano I look at is check that damper upstop rail, because it's so important. If it's set too high, then you have lots of bounce in this damper, and it'll come up and come back down on the back of the key, and the pianist will feel that in their fingers, but they won't necessarily know exactly what it is. And so they'll talk about sluggish, or they'll talk about all kinds of things, but it's this very noticeable bump when the damper upstop lever, damper underlever comes down.
On the, do you want it like on here?
Yep. I heard somebody talking.
I muted him.
Okay.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Is everybody seeing this action model as full screen? Yeah, let me know if you're having difficulty.
Yes.
I got one message, but
Full screen.
Okay, good.
Any questions on that so far?
Eric, what's your method for discovering the point where the upstop rail should be? Do you take it off the pedal, or
do I take it off the pedal?
You depress the sustain pedal. And,
yeah, I see what you're saying. I do it primarily off of the key, because that's what the standard is. But you're absolutely right. There should be, the spec is, it should be anyway, that the damper gets lifted to the same height, whether it's with the key or